So, Mr. Mediratta, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, EU India's forum, giving me chance for speaking into this brilliant audience. Thanks a lot for making me part of it. I would like to give you an overview of the power market in India and power exchanges in particular, and that will be of relevance to people most people who have come from abroad. And of course, most of the things I will be discussing may be aware, my Indian friends may be aware. So I may quickly run on some part, but I will dwell on some other part. So this is what I wanted to present, Indian market, broad features, exchange highlights, and EU versus India, because it's we have some speakers from EU, so I would like to just give you brief. Of course, we can't cover everything, but brief, just what are highlights for of the market. If you see this, the basic infrastructure or the framework, that differences. So this is our market structure. Broadly, we have OTC markets for anything long term. We still have not gone into derivatives, so that is a more rigid part of the market structure. Of course, with we have divided the structure in three market segments. One we call as long-term, medium-term, and short-term. So, as you know, that any vertically integrated entity, when it starts coming to maybe more competitive market, it has its own legacy long-term contracts, and these long-term contracts have been 25 years. Of course, we have also now started calling anything which is more than 7 years as a long term. But this has been, there are a lot of legacy contracts which are there. And short term, we are calling as those transactions which happen for within a year. And so more market, more competition, more vibrancy is there in the short term markets. Then we have exchange. Exchange has got a very limited forward contract, a forward market, which is up to 11 days in advance. Of course, there is some regulatory jurisdictional issues for which we have not been able to go beyond 11-day forward market, but we hopefully will be ready to go into that market segments also. But we have this structure currently that exchanges can operate only up to 11 days forward market, and they are all delivery-based market. Derivatives and other markets we still have to see, but we have resolved most of the issues to actually go into the next stage of our market development, where we should be able to launch derivatives. This is the how we have seen things evolving in long term and other market segments. So long term, medium term, 10 years back, almost 94% was under this. So out of total energy generated in the country, 94% was through these long term contracts. Now in this year, last year, or this year, you can see it's 88%. So there's been some change. Of course, those our friends who have come from abroad, they won't see this as a big jump. But of course, the reasons are that they are legacy contract, they are 25-year contract, and there are still utilities seeking for doing long-term contract. So that is also one reason, and for that reason, we have not been able to actually ramp up our short-term markets. So short-term markets is 12%. And out of which exchanges are about 40%. So out of total energy generated in the country, 4.3% is through exchange. Traders get transactions done for 4.3%, so almost 40%. Direct bilateral. This is also interesting segment we have, which probably may not be there in Europe. But of course, in GCC, it may be there, like what we call as banking, where transactions happen on energy to energy basis. There is no financial settlement, but It's like barter between two parties. One party gives some power during certain period, and it takes it back. So there is no financial transaction for those. There is no financial settlement for those transactions, and this is about 1.6%. And the imbalance market, which we call as unscheduled interchange or deviation, that is about 2%, and it has remained around 2% for a long time. Of course, we have been attempting to do a lot of reduction in terms of deviations, but we have not succeeded in actually reducing it to less than 2%. This is the profile of the market as on date. And if you see, the exchanges started in 2008. First time there was a discussion in 2006 that whether we should have what kind of exchange model we should have. And that time we also discussed whether it should be voluntary, it should be centralized, it should be decentralized. So all those, that debate happened in 2006, and post 2006, it was our regulator, CRC, approved of that we can have a model where the participation is mandatory. And it is basically a decentralized structure, what you have in Europe. So we have gone ahead with the model of Europe. Of course, the choice was given to exchanges that they can propose their own model. And we found that this model, what Europe has got, is most suitable to Indian market because it gives choice to states, utilities, that if they want to do transaction, they can do. Otherwise, if they want to continue with their long-term contract or medium-term contract, so they can continue. So with that, background, the exchanges were approved, and two exchanges came in. We are IEX, and the other exchange is PXIL, and both were approved in 2008, and both started in 2008. And this is how we have grown in terms of total volume that in last 10, 11 years. So you can see with the CAGR of 33%, the volume growth has been very good. What we achieved, transparency, what we achieved in terms of benefit to the participant is that payment security, that was a big issue when we started. And people saw this as a big advantage that seller is able to get money upfront. It doesn't have to wait for wait for money. That was a very big reason. Third reason was competition. So as exchange came into picture, people saw this as a very, it's a platform where if you are not able to do any transaction, if you are not able to do your contracts, you still have a choice that you can come and trade on the market. And this gave a lot of comfort to the new generators, that when new generators started putting up their plant, they thought that if this is a market, if I am able to get long-term or medium-term contracts, then it should be fine. Otherwise, there is a market, and this market is neutral and competitive, so I should be able to sell in the market. So that actually was the reason why we have seen a good growth in terms of volume. But of course, after two exchanges, we have been able to do much better in the sense that we currently have about 98% market share. And we have continuously been holding that kind of market share. Of course, there are reasons. And then reason was that we had definitely better technology, better transparency. So all those things actually were why out of two exchanges, only one did better. But of course, as we understand that similar experience has been there in other parts of the world, wherever two exchanges have come. So not you now normally see a market share of 90-10 or 80-20. So it's not beyond 20. So because the liquidity begets the liquidity, and that reason is actually making us win in the market. Now, if you come to our market platform, we provide three market segments for electricity trading. Day-ahead market is the major one, as you have in Europe, 90%. And then we have intraday market, and then we have term-ahead market. Term-ahead is a very limited market for a week and then days together. And then we have REC and then ESERTs. These two markets started in 2011, and then ESERT market started in 2017. And both have been based on basically cap and trade mechanism, by which there is a target set for people to make to meet, and then if the participant are meeting the target or overachieving the targets, they get the certificates issued. And if they don't overachieve, they underachieve, then they have to buy those certificates. So this is the basic mechanism for ESERTs. And REC, because there is a obligation, for that reason people are required to buy RECs for meeting their renewable purchase obligation. About the exchange, as I told, we are doing about 6,000 megawatt plus of transaction, which is about 4% of total electricity generated in the country, or 40% of short-term market. We have 4,000 plus participants in the electricity segment. We have touched a volume of 12,900 megawatt maximum round the clock, which is about 308 gigawatt hours, or million units we call in India. And then we have all the entities like distribution utilities, generators, and then we have few industries, not all the industries, but few industries, because industries more than 1 megawatt have been allowed to purchase from the market. And broad features of this market is we have a physical delivery based market, and the model is exactly same what the EU follows. We have only thing is we earlier had 1 hour trading period or delivery period till 2012, but after 2012 we reduced it to 15 minutes. And then for each 15-minute time block, the participants can do transaction on our exchange. The model of clearing is the same. You have auction during certain period up to 12 o'clock. Every participant is required to submit their bids. It can be buyers or it can be a seller, both. And this is a closed auction, where after auction we discover a price, and price for each 15 minutes is different from other 15 minutes. And this is the demand and supply curve is drawn, and then we discover a price. And then for the purpose of transmission congestion management, we have divided the country in smaller areas. And generally these areas are like we have 1 or 2 states in one bid area. So, and this is we found is very suitable, because we don't have congestion within that bid area, but across the bid area the congestion was likely, and for that reason we have divided the whole country into. Initially we started with 10 bid areas, but later we made it 13. So of course we came to a smaller bid area. The reason was that there was a congestion happening within the region also across 2 states. So we had to actually divide the bid area into a smaller bid area, which problem we understand in EU you are facing, that when you are looking at market congestion or the transmission congestion, it's not easy for you to make smaller bid area or divide the area into 2 or 3. And there has been issues from maybe the countries. They have sovereign authorities and they have reasons. But in India, it has been much easier for us to actually, if we find there is a congestion, the system operator decides that we should go for a smaller bid area, and then we are able to do that. Delivery, settlement, risk management, financial, everything is done by exchange. We don't have any clearing corporation, separate clearing corporation as you have in EU, separate clearing corporations. We do it in-house. An important part of the market is that we still have 2 simple types of orders in the market, which in EU you have much more complex orders, which we have proposed for more complex orders. So simple orders are like single bid or portfolio bid, as you call, and then second is block bid. In block bid there is again further advanced version where you can do you can have a mother and child linked block bid. But otherwise these 2 major block bids are there available in the system. And we also have proposed to our regulator for approval for the new bid types, which are more complex, and of course it takes many of requirements of our thermal generators, our states, since we have 15-minute time block. So there are many states still want to go for a block, because they don't want to miss out on few 15-minute time block, because if you miss out on that, then our intraday market is not so liquid that you can get 15-minute your requirement fulfilled in that market. So for that reason, these block bids are very common. We are going for, again, a profile block bid and then minimum quantity block bid, so that there is a choice available to the market participant. Okay. There are a few highlights. So can I take 5 minutes? Okay. Day-ahead market volume, the growth and price, both are related. So more competition, more volumes, and then lower price, and then again it increase the volume of the market. This is a typical trend, and it all is seasonal, and of course it can be related to different factors. Mostly the factors are related to supply, or it's on the demand. Since we are growing at the rate of 6 to 5% every year, so though we have surplus capacity, we have about 350 gigawatt of installed capacity against our peak demand of 178 gigawatt. But still we find there is a shortage during certain period of years and during some period of season. So we see that there is a hike in prices during certain months. So all this is demand and supply. And the important, which is very distinct from Europe, is that we have very large participation base, and that gives us a lot of liquidity and lot of strength, in the sense the resilience that we have. Distribution utility, about 26, 28 utilities are there. Then we have 4,000 plus consumers, industrial consumers. Of course, they are not always part of the market, but they also provide a kind of certainty to the volume. They provide liquidity. And but on an average, we get about 1,000. Currently, we are getting about 600 participants daily on the market, which probably in Europe it's not normal to have such kind of a large participation. Second is that we have been able to reduce our transmission congestion. When we started, there was no congestion, but slowly when we started having more volumes, then congestion was more happening, because power was flowing from a cheaper region to costlier region, and there we found there are constraints. But we added a lot of transmission capacity, and fortunately for us, last 5 years, if you see, the congestion was not there in 2011 so much, but it increased in 13, 14, 15, but after that it has started coming down, and now we lose only up to 1% of volume just because of congestion. Otherwise, normally we don't see congestion happening in the grid. Third part is that the utilities are making very use of this market for meeting their requirement. So their usual requirement, and second part is they are also doing it smartly, because they want to optimize their power procurement. So they are doing it. So they are actually varying their requirement or buy from the market heavily. So if these are typical states, what they do in terms of volumes. And then we also have the possibility of doing transaction through exchange for optimizing your requirement. In Europe, we understand that whatever you buy, you give your schedule by 8 o'clock day before, and that's final. But here we have allowed utilities to make changes in their schedules. If you are doing under long-term contract, you are able to revise your schedule till 1.5 hours before. And that gives us this chance that they can see the market, and then in the market they can get cheaper power. If cheaper power is available, they buy from the market, and then they make changes in their requirement from their long-term contract. So this is also happening. So smart procurement is now utilities are very much there doing. And then HHI, which is the indication of competition in the market, we are quite good in that term also. Like we have HHI of this our market for buy and sell is about less than 0.15, which is considered to be unconcentrated market. So that is, in that sense also, we have achieved quite a good competitive benchmark. Now, few things I will just run through, that what things we have in Indian market and what things we feel we are not having, but we should think of, and what EU has got. So we, of course, have a competitive wholesale market because all segments of our market have become competitive. If you want to buy long, medium, short, or even exchange, so everything is competitive. Second is liquid day-ahead market. Participation is voluntary, and so large consumers are able to participate in the market. Third-party access to the grid, to the network. At wholesale level, there's complete openness in terms of access to the grid. Of course, in the state or the utility level, there are some issues. Smaller bid areas and zones that we have achieved, and that is a big positive for us, because then the congestion is taken care. We don't need to look at going to a nodal pricing. For zonal pricing, we find is good enough for us. Independent system operator. We already have an entry-exit transmission pricing system, which is very good for the market, and we call it POC, point of connection transmission pricing. Capacity allocation framework is very much there. It's very robust and it's working fine, with maybe some tuning we need to do as we go along. And imbalance system is also very robust. So these are the few things which we have, but some missing things which we feel that it's our wish list, that aggregators currently are not there. Churning of trades are not happening so much as you have in Europe, because every transaction is considered a separate transaction. You can't do netting in terms that when you do a transaction, basically you have to pay for transmission charge separately for each one. So that increases the cost. So as we have seen churning happening in Europe, the same is not happening in India. Generators are not allowed to buy to correct their actually imbalances. Dynamic ATC calculation is still not so much there. Very limited RE generators in dead market, which we understand that in Germany and every other country you have a lot of renewable generators coming into the market. In terms of transmission pricing, we are pricing transmission for each transaction, not on net basis. Netting of POC charge within a zone is not there. When somebody is coming on the market, he has to pay for POC. It can be within part of a zone, but every intra-zone entity has to pay for those charges. Market segments which we have not been able to come out, and which we are on the way to do it, the derivatives, ancillary, market-based ancillary. We have an elementary ancillary market, but still we have to make it more market-linked. Capacity market and market-based transmission capacity allocation. Now, EU versus India. If you see one is that if you see more developed countries in Europe, so all these countries have got much higher level of transactions happening through exchange. So like in Scandinavia, 90%, 49% Germany, UK, and they have got, because their own legacy reasons for having differences. But most of the countries are doing much more than what we in India are doing. And the way the market has grown in those countries is much higher. The rate at which it has increased is much higher. Of course, there are legacy reasons. The long-term contracts are there. We have not been able to come out of those contracts because of sanctity, keeping the sanctity. Okay. So these are just last two slides to see the difference what you have in terms of EU and India. So in EU, there is 25 countries connected to couple their market of debt. That's through price coupling of regions. 8 power exchanges are coupled today. Total consumption is about 2,400 billion unit or terawatt hours, and total debt market volume is 500 billion unit. So about 20% on an average. In India, we are also a mini continent in the sense that we have 29 states, though we have a federal structure, but still there is a lot of autonomy given to states. So that makes us something like Europe, but of course we don't have much of seams issue what Europe has, because still the federal government has got a lot of powers to make regulations and policies which are in our favor. And our total consumption in India is about 1,200 billion units, and out of that 46 billion units are traded through the market, so about 4%. And the cross-border, we have not been able to establish so far through exchange, of course, we are having government to government and the bilateral transaction happening across our 3 of our countries, neighboring countries, but still we have not been able to couple the market through DARE, but it is going to be there because the necessary framework has been put in place. So broadly, if you see the differences, market type, both have got net pool settlement or voluntary participation, or you can call it as decentralized model. Ancillary market, Europe has got market-based. Still, we are moving to that, but we have to move. So far, not moved. RE integration today, in case of Europe, RE integration has been achieved through market largely. And of course, you still are thinking of redesigning the market because still we find it's not sufficient, and your intraday market is also handling a part of it. But in our case, we still have to see that kind of thing happening. The reasons are many. I won't go into detail. Then we have interconnections, very good interconnections we have. Though in Europe, you are targeting 10% by 2020 and 15% by 2030. We already have achieved much more than that. Price hedging is done through, of course, your derivative market. We don't have. So these are the few things which probably you can go through. This is the last slide. Only thing is one missing, or maybe one thing which we are doing, and is that intraday gate closure, which we have about 4 hours, which we are trying to reduce it to 30 minutes or less, which is there in Europe. I think we'll close it here. Thank you, sir.